Another member of the Byrds with us. We're going to be talking to Gene Parsons very soon after this track by the man himself. This is Long Way Back.
Well, it's a long way back to the things I know are real, and it's a long way back to the things that I can feel, and it's a long way back to a green and growing tree, and it's a long way back to what there used to be. I've been troubling about all the things I hear. I've been troubling about the earth's progress career. And I travel that road just as often as I can, just to spend an hour lifetime to walk barefooted on the land. And I travel that road, even if it's in my mind, to a place that's fit for every living kind. I've been troubling about all there is to do. I've been troubling, 'cause I know the way is through.
Long Way Back from the album Kindling by Gene Parsons, actually now reissued as part of a larger collection called the Kindling Collection. And I'm delighted to say that for Original Masters, Gene Parsons is with us now. Gene, welcome to Scotland. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
This album here is quite an interesting collection for anybody who's into getting at, your content and music of the Byrds and the Burritos as well as your own stuff.
Oh, yeah, there's quite a wide array of material there. And we also have another record that just came out, too, that's called Birds of a Feather, that is Meridian Green, my partner and I's latest effort. And if anyone's interested in what's happening with Gene Parsons right now rather than 25 years ago, they can listen to that, too. Birds of a Feather, folks.
How often can you mention the title of your new album and get it plugged?
Yeah, really. Capitalism is wonderful, isn't it?
You've actually brought along the instrument you're very much associated with, the string bender thing that you developed back in those days. But before we get around to actually having the man who invented the thing demonstrate it for us, I'd like to talk just a bit about how you got into actually playing instruments and so on. First, I believe the first one for you was the banjo, right?
The 5-string banjo it really was a 4-string banjo until I could find one with a 5th string on it. It was my first love, that and harmonica, and then guitar, and then bass, then drums, then pedal steel guitar.
I mean, you got on to playing the bass really by kind of accidental meeting, didn't you?
Well, I did, yeah. Actually, I met a fellow by the name of Gib Gilbo, and he heard me play banjo, and he says, "Gee, would you like to do a session?" First one I'd ever done. And so I said, sure, being a young kid, excited about doing anything like that. Did the session, went home back up in the desert, got a phone call from him a couple of weeks later, said, "Would you like to go on the road, kid?" And I said, "Well, you bet." And so I quit my job, told my dad I was leaving forever, grabbed my banjo, and went back to Los Angeles. And he said, "Great, you made it." He says, "By the way, I forgot to tell you, you'll not be playing banjo, you'll be playing bass. Here's your bass." He did it to me with drums, too. Years later, I was living somewhere else, and we hadn't seen each other for a year, and I got a call from Gib Gilbo. And he said, Gene, how much money you're making now? And I told him, and he says, well, how'd you like to make twice as much? And I said, I'd love it, of course. He says, well, come over. I'm working at a place called the Jack of Diamonds out in Mojave Desert. He says, why don't you come on, and I've got a 6 or 7 night a week job and twice as much money. And I said, great. And I grabbed my bass and I arrived there, and he says, oh, forgot to tell you, you're playing drums. There's your drums. They're up on the stage. I said, but I can't play drums. And he says, oh, they're all drunk anyway in here. He says, they'll never know the difference. There you go. There's the story of my life.
Well, then, of course, there were many other bits of it, too. Like, for example, your meeting with Clarence White, the late Mr. White.
That was a really great thing that happened to me, to meet Clarence White. And I really cherish the years that I played with him.
Now, he'd been involved at that stage in a band called the Kentucky Colonels, which was very much a sort of earthy bluegrass band. What kind of music had you been playing up to that time? What was the thing you were involved with Gilbo?
Country rock, pretty much. And in fact, where I met Clarence was in a recording session that was a country rock session. And the producer said, I got this little guitar player. He's been playing bluegrass, but he's just now switching to electric. And the fact is, he still played electric guitar with a capo on it, like in bluegrass. And Clarence arrived, and I thought, well, I wonder what kind of guitar player this is. And as soon as he plugged into his amplifier and started playing, I was astounded, and worked with him until he died.
I know it's very hard to draw the line in retrospect, but what do you think the first country rock albums were? I mean, a lot of people cite things like, Graham Parsons' International Submarine Band and so on, but then you can go back a year and find the Everlys doing something which is very country rock.
Sure.
What do you think it lies?
Well, I think you're right on with that. I think the Everly Brothers were the forerunners of country rock. I think, golly, Bill Monroe was doing country rock, really. I mean, some of his stuff rocked right along, didn't it?
Yeah, certainly did. Yeah, no question about it. And then, of course, with Clarence White, on to the Byrds.
Well, Clarence and I played in a band with Gib Gilbo for years called the Nashville West, which was a country rock band, and we played around the L.A. area in El Monte and in Bakersfield. And Clarence had been recording with the Byrds off and on for, a year or so, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And when Sweetheart of the Rodeo came out, of course, Clarence was on that record, and they wanted him to go on the road, and they needed a drummer. Well, Clarence says, well, I'm glad to go, but I want Gene to be the drummer. And so he basically leveraged me into the Byrds. They liked what I played, of course, but and then shortly after that, we did a few gigs, and Chris left and went with the Burrito Brothers. Clarence and I were invited to join the Burrito Brothers, but we stayed with the Byrds. It was just a choice we made.
Yeah. We'll have a listen to one of those Byrds tracks and then come back and talk some more and have a twang at the old string bender. Gunga Din there from the Birds album Ballad of Easy Rider, and actually talking to Gene Parsons, who's with us for Original Masters today while that was on. I discovered something about the cover of the Easy Rider album. Gene?
Yes, my dad was the original Harley Davidson low rider, or easy rider if you want to say. And I had a picture of dear old Dad with his cowboy hat and his Winchester and his 1928 Harley Davidson that I presented to CBS, and they said, it's perfect for this cover. But they kind of blotted his face out a little bit so they wouldn't have to pay him any royalties. Lovely guys that they are. But that's my pop on there, and that's his 1928 Harley on the cover of Easy Rider.
All the bike fans are going to be saying, what happened to the Harley?
Well, I asked Dad what happened to Harley, and he didn't really remember. He had a bunch of bikes like that, and he rode them across country, across the desert, and I don't think he was too kind to them.
Yeah?
No.
That song, I believe, Gunga Din, the one we just listened to, was written around about the period of playing in New York with the Birds, too.
Yeah, it was, we flew out to do a gig in New York, and Chuck Berry, who was Mr. Rock and Roll, didn't make it there, and the crowd was mad, and we were had, and we turned around and went back to L.A., and chased the sun a little bit. I don't know how Gunga Din got in there, but I know that John York's mother came to visit us at the hotel, and she had a leather jacket on, and they wouldn't let us into the restaurant. There you go. That's the whole song.
You've brought with you one of your own string bender modified guitars, and this is something that obviously, as the developer of this particular instrument, you're associated with, and very pleased to have you actually going to demonstrate one of them to us on the show today. Tell me where the idea came from.
Well, the idea came from Clarence White's guitar playing. He used to do a lick where he would chime a string and then pull the string over the nut where the tuning pegs are on a Telecaster. And it was a really neat lick, and it was unique back in those days. And he and I had just put a basic track down for a session, and he was going to overdub the guitar. And he mentioned, gee, I wish I had 3 hands, because I'd like to do that, the chime and pull the string over the nut lick somewhere else up the neck, and I really need 3 hands. And so I said, well, I'll provide the 3rd hand here, and so we actually did a really simple lick where I was pulling the string over the nut. He did the work on the neck and chimed the string, and it worked out pretty well. I don't think the record was ever released, but it was a nice experiment. But what happened from that was, Clint said, I wish I had some way to do that without, having assistance. And I said, well, we could hook cables and rods up to your guitar and rig this, hydraulic deal up down here. And he said, nah, I think that's a little bit too much. If you can figure out a way to put it on a guitar and have it just be included with the guitar, so the guitar will go in the case, so it's not obvious I'm doing anything, then I'll be interested. So I came up with the idea of rigging it to the shoulder strap. And after 2 minutes of convincing Clarence that it was really okay for me to cut a 2-inch square hole in his Telecaster, we proceeded with the project.
Which is going to take some convincing, the price of those things.
Yeah, well, the Telecaster was pretty much a workhorse guitar back in those days. But he had a special one. And anyway, so that's how that came about.
What about the actual mechanics of building the first one? Were you particularly, mechanical when you were a boy? Did you kind of get into this?
I was raised in a machine shop. My dad is a machinist and a welder and an engineer, and I pretty much was raised with grease on my hands.
So tell me how you devised the prototype to what we're actually looking at today.
Well, what you're looking at right here is, this is probably the 3rd one that's in the world. It's an acoustic string bender. And that's taken a couple years to develop, because we had to lighten it down and figure out design and patent the way to install it inside the guitar. But the original one, which was on Clarence's Telecaster, I got steel guitar parts, and we really didn't know whether we were going to pull the E string or the B string or the G or the D. We figured it would be the B, because the G string is easily bent by hand, and that's the one that usually gets bent. The B is a little harder. And so we ended up with the B, of course. I got steel guitar parts that I got from Sneaky Pete, and I made a few things up here and there and rigged it for him.
Well, you're going to show us how this thing actually works and what it does now.
What it does is it works off the shoulder strap. The shoulder strap is attached to a lever that sticks through the guitar. And the lever is really a bell crank that's mounted inside the guitar that attaches to a connecting rod and goes through some linkages to what we call a pull hub. And the pull hub then attaches to the B string. And when you push down on the neck of the guitar, the shoulder strap engages the lever, which then through the linkages turns the hub and pulls the string up to a pre-tuned full interval or note, such as this. See if you can hear it out there. There's a B string. You can get a half tone. There's a full interval. There it is.
Beautiful stuff. I know you've chosen this next song because it demonstrates the sound of the string bender on record particularly well.
I think so. It's been probably 10 years since I've listened to this particular track, but if I recall, if my memory serves me well, Clarence did some brilliant string bending on this particular track, and he also played through a Leslie speaker, which was something that he liked to do.
Nothing but a piece of driftwood, but I can feel the pain and misery. And in this rut, I'm stuck with roots of pine and me. Well, I'm not a man, so I must be a tree. Yes, I must be a tree. I bloom like spring, then comes the fall that withers me. And through this cold, I'm dormant till you call on me. That's why I know that I must be a tree. On me, it's bigger. My heart has hardened like a knot of wood. Things won't be so shady for you anymore. Someday this tree will branch out toward the other wood. I can't be real, no, I must be a tree. I bloom like spring, then comes the fall that withers me. And through this cold, I'm dormant till you call on me. That's why I know that I must be a tree. Yeah, that's why I know that I must be a tree. That's why I know that I must be a tree. Why I know that I must be a tree. That's why I know that I must be a tree. That's why I know that I must be a tree.
I Must Be a Tree, another one of the tracks from the Gene Parsons Kindling album, reissued on Kindling Collection and featuring lots of string bending going on during the course of that. Fine, fine stuff there. As far as the string bender itself was concerned, once you'd actually made these things yourself and come up with the prototypes and so on, what about the commercial implications of it at that stage?
Yeah, well, we continued to make them until we couldn't afford to do it anymore. And we had to raise the price on it because I was making them too cheap, it seems like. And our accountant told us, well, the best thing you could do is just stop making them because you'd be better off financially.
How many of these things did you
There's a few
actually
thousand of them out there that I've made. And we started really trying to make it into a business. We tried to quit at first, but people would call and really want them badly. So we decided, okay, let's really make it a business. So Meridian Green, my partner, is the manager of the business. And we went into mass production with the classic model, and we're now marketing them through Fender guitars. And those are quite expensive. They're a very good unit. Through Fender guitars are quite expensive. We also started setting up authorized installers around our country and also the rest of the world, and you actually have one here in Glasgow. Moon Guitars, as a matter of fact, if I might mention their name.
Yeah.
And Moon Guitars is on, let's see if I can say this, Pollokshaws Road?
I would give you high marks for that.
Thank you. And that's in Glasgow, Moon Guitars. They install our classic unit in Telecaster guitars. We're also just now negotiating with Fender Guitars to come out with a lower priced unit, which is a really fine unit, but made so that it can have a lower price so that it's more available to people, trying to get that price down. I always hated it when people couldn't really afford to buy the unit because I know how it is to be a musician. It's difficult, and we want to have them be more available. So they're going to be offered through Fender, we believe, in the very near future.
We've featured some music so far from Gene Parsons' past. What about Gene Parsons' present and the work you do with Meridian at the moment?
I'm real happy to be doing a duo sort of show with Meridian Green, and we also have a band at home that we tour with. And we did come out with an album called Birds of a Feather, and we're going to be coming out with another Parsons Green album this year, we believe, or actually next year. We'll be done with it this year, we hope. Meridian is going to be coming out with a new album that I'm going to produce, or at least partly produce with her. And I'm hoping to come out with another solo album in the next year as well.
It's one of these things that inevitably, no matter how far down the line you go as a solo artist now, you will always be forever associated with the Birds, with the Burritos and all the rest of it. Do you keep in touch much with the remaining musicians from those lineups?
The one person that I do keep in touch with is Skip Batten. He and I are pretty good friends. And the fact is, we just did a little tour in Europe about 6 weeks ago. Skip and I talk on the phone quite a bit. He's now a organic berry farmer in northern Oregon. He always wanted to be a farmer, and now, by golly, he is one. And that's the only one. Once in a while, I talk with Chris Hillman. That's about the only people I talk with.
Well, here's some of your new music now. Gene Parsons, inventor of the string bender, banjoist, bassist, drummer, and anything else that comes along. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.